Derek, can you do a sound check?
I can hear you.
Darren, I think these are all too loud. Testing, testing. That's better.
All right, we got 5:30. Ari's going to start us with the pledge here.
I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Good job. All right, Sandy, can we get a roll call?
Nathan Parchman.
Here.
Jessica Lott. Here. Chris Monroe. Stephanie Small here.
here.
James Campbell. And Andrea Foney.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Awesome, thank you. Next is 1.3, approval of the minutes. If everybody's read over that and doesn't have any issues, can we get an approval?
So moved.
Got a motion? Can I get a second?
Second.
All right, we got a motion second. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, motion passes. Then we'll move on to 2.1. Sandy?
So this is a resolution approving our new copier lease. So it came due, and we put out an RFP. It does expire in April 1st. Sumner One was the chosen vendor. We went out and we received 4 proposals. Sumner was the lowest, if you consider watts, was lower for their monthly. However, with the add-on, it did make them a little higher. We have used Sumner now for the past, I don't know how long, many, many years. We have a good relationship with them. They have very good customer service. So we are looking at a resolution to approve a contract for $27.35 a month. I'm sorry, $29.27 a month.
All right, does anybody have questions on the committee about this 1.2? All right, anybody on the council? Public? All right, if not, can I get a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. Can I get a roll call, Sandy?
Parchman,
Yes.
Lott,
Yes.
Small here,
Yes.
Campbell,
Yes.
Foney.
Yes.
All right, motion approved and passed. 3.1, City Hall hours. Walter?
Yes, so wanted to inform the committee and the city council about some changes that we're going to have in City Hall hours. Currently, our hours are 8 a.m. to 4:30, and that is during the time that a lot of people are working. So we started talking about, was there a way that we could be open extended hours in the morning, in the evening, so if people need to come to City Hall for any reason, that they can make it here instead of having to take time out of their workday. So starting March 11th, we're going to start having City Hall hours from 7 a.m. to 5:30 p.m. And one way of doing that and being able to provide flexible hours for employees that could help with retention and recruitment is that we are allowing some employees to work 4 10-hour days instead of the regular 5 8-hour days. So employees will still work 40 hours, but since we're open longer, they'll be able to work 10-hour days. Some people will work 10-hour days. Some people will work 8-hour days according to what schedule works best for them. And we've worked it out with all of the departments and department heads to make sure that all of the shifts are covered and that we will be operational at all times and covering all of those hours and being able to be flexible for our employees who trying to help them with their work-life balance. So just let you know that we're going to kind of have a soft rollout for that to make sure that it works for us before we start advertising to everybody that about our hours and that way. So a lot of that has to deal with the front counter at the first and second floor, particularly utility billing. And so I don't know if Sandy has anything to say about that, but worked it out so that they'll be available for anybody who needs to come in and with assistance between 7 and 5:30. So if they have any questions on that, otherwise it's just informational about what we're doing.
No, just as Walter said, we'll be starting March 11th. It's going to be kind of like a soft opening. We want to try it to make sure, and then once we're sure that everything is good, we'll start advertising that'll be open to the public.
Yeah, and so we're doing this as a trial period, see how it goes and see if it's helpful for people. Some of our departments this won't apply to. Obviously, public safety, they're a 24-hour operation. Parks, not really affecting them because they work nights and weekends and weird hours anyway. It's mostly going to be City Hall offices where it's affecting. So.
Yeah, I think this is a good move. It's for employee retention and just to give people flexibility if they want to. Not everybody wants to move to that the way it sounds, but the ones who can or will, maybe it'll be good for them. They can try it. And I think it was a 6-month rollout. You had to do it for 6 months at a time, so it keeps staffing and make sure that the managers have enough time to prepare for it. So it sounds like a good idea, win-win. So we got more hours for the City Hall as well as flexibility for the staff. So hopefully that will lead to retention. So nothing else, we'll move on.
That's it.
Anybody else have any comments or questions on that for the Walter, Sandy? All right, moving to 3.2, presentation of the fiscal year 2025 budget. Sandy?
Thank you. So basically, what we're going to look at is our FY25 budget. We've gone over the budget, in January. We did some preliminaries. We kind of went over revenue projections at that time. What this represents is I will go over basically the administration department. Each other the departments will go over public works, community development. So we'll kind of do an overview again. So when looking at this, one thing we'll want to look at is where we are. So the total budget expenditures are $135,965,000. This represents the 30% increase from last year. Most of that being to what we call interfund transfers, which with the park enhancement and the pool transfers, that really brings that balance up. So when we take those interfund transfers out, our actual budget is $107,777,000. So in fund accounting, every fund has to balance. So if we have revenue in this fund, it has to have an expense that goes out, but then that revenue is again projected in the fund it's going to, and then that expense. So a lot of times we're hitting that revenue twice and that expense twice. So the true picture is this budget with interfund transfers of $107,777 versus last year doing the same, taking out transfers is $94 million. So it's about a 14% increase with, again, the major issue, or not issue, the major increase is due to that the pool and the community park enhancement. So that's what we're looking at with the summary. Here is just, again, we like to do some dashboards to give you an idea of where we have been. You can see history of the complete budget, and again, increase due to our projects. We can show where the money goes. This year 21% is capital spending, and that is under the 05 Bill O'Fallon Trust Fund / capital. Personnel costs make up 22%, and we have about 24% that is transferred to other funds or reserves. Then when we look at our general fund, you can see Again, taking out those interfund transfers, our FY25 general fund revenues are about 27 million compared to last year's 26. You can look at our expenses. Again, there is a transfer that we have put aside for our general fund reserve of $1.1 million, and this will be used to help start building up those reserves again, because again, we're going to be using those this next fiscal year for the community park enhancement. So we want to get a jump start on rebuilding those. So you will see a 1.1 million transfer for reserves. This little pie chart kind of gives you an example of, shows where that general fund, what makes up the general fund, shows by department, what department has the largest. This year, again, it's general, and that's due to the transfers. And then we have, by category, you'll see the 38% is a transfer to reserves. And 32% is, again, the majority of general fund, which is, again, police department, community development, streets, administration, IT, MECOM, all of those make up the general fund. So 32% of the general fund budget total is in personnel cost. Then we show basically the general fund revenue projections. And this, hasn't really changed much from when I presented it back in January. The only change I did make, I made the use tax the same as we are this year. And part of it was IML did come out with their projections, and they're still projecting it to be where it's at. So I went ahead, originally I had a -6%, thinking that it's going to change. IML does, their estimates are such that I made that change. Here's revenue trends. You can kind of see where we have been over the year. You can see from 2019 to 2025, and then we did a 2024 with a 2024 year to date. Again, nothing has really changed from the January presentation.
Do you want to make a comment about the governor's proposal briefly?
I had that, but I can do it now.
Well, you're talking about revenues. Yes.
Right. So one of the things that the governor is proposing is that we eliminate the 1% grocery tax. So that's just in his initial budget ideas. It has not been approved, but that would affect us almost $1.2 million. So it would have a substantial impact on the city. So if that were approved, which again, it's got to go through a lot of channels, we will have to re-look at our budget, re-look at our revenues, look at our expenses. But right now, it is being, tossed around in the budget, in the governor's budget. So that is something that we will look at, keep an eye on. I know there's something in today's that, again, it just may be something to get Chicago riled up. We don't know, but nothing has been approved. But we wanted to bring that to your attention that, should things change, this budget will be looked at again. Because it is a living, breathing document that we do make changes. So, again, the rest are just kind of dashboards to show you revenue trends and expense trends. We have them for all of our departments. There's really, again, it's a lot for your information to take a look at to see, how the city has grown and how our revenues and our expenses have increased. So we have them for all of our departments. One thing we didn't do, we looked at our Bill O'Fallon Trust. We were going to do a nice little bar graph, but it made no sense. So we did look at, let's just give you a snapshot of the projects that came out of the Bill O'Fallon Capital Improvement Fund. Remember, it used to just be called the Capital Improvement Fund. It wasn't the Bill O'Fallon Trust Fund. So you'll see some of these projects that were not funded by the new Bill O'Fallon Trust quarter-cent sales tax. But this is all projects that we've done throughout since 2015 for all those large capital projects. So you'll see, when we started the Bill O'Fallon Trust, there's the, we've got the design for the community park enhancements. We have the All Abilities Playground, and then this year, the additional pickleball courts, they're actually a carryover. Those probably won't get done this fiscal year '24, so we have to budget them in 2025. Same way with the downtown pavilion, we had that $165,000, that's a carryover. The new ones in here are the new parking lot on the northeast side of the park. That was at $600,000 that was decided to be used with the Bill O'Fallon Trust Fund. And then the $850,000 for the slide, but also the whole community park pool and enhancement. Since it is a capital project, we do put that under 0502, or 05, not necessarily meaning it's all being funded by the Bill O'Fallon Trust, but it is a capital project, so it's listed there as well. Then we have our large spend detail, and again, this is the detail of any of our larger projects, and it corresponds with our line items. You'll see these projects also in the line item. This is kind of a snapshot so that when the budget is approved, if it is on this list, then we know that it has been approved by the council, and it gives then the departments the go-ahead that yes, it has been approved. It won't need to go back through council approval unless there's a substantial change or if the scope of the project changes. So this kind of gives you a bird's eye view of all of the projects that are in the full budget this year. And again, a lot of those we've talked about, they correspond with the CIP and also with the individual projects that we've looked at before. We've talked about the new position requests that are in this year's budget. They have not changed from January. Again, Public Works, streets, 2 people, telecommunicator, a park specialist, library, and then converting 2 part-time into full-time positions. So no changes on those. This is a chart we add just for the budget for your information. You'll see these are our current debts outstanding. We don't have, we did put the pool because that is really now the utility tax that's in there. We do not have the new wastewater treatment plant improvements because we don't have the final numbers on that. And it kind of shows you what departments they're used for and their purpose. Again, just little visuals for you to look at. And then that is all of our, basic dashboards. The next, first, are there any questions on any of those? I went through them kind of quick. Hopefully you had a chance to review them in advance. So any questions on those before we go into the line item?
Sandy, I have a question. On that sheet that's titled Bill O'Fallon Trust Capital Improvements, I know you just explained that it's not quite just the Bill O'Fallon. It's like a history of capital improvements to include.
Correct.
This is a small ask, but I think it makes a difference. Can we asterisk that page, something that says, because anybody following along with the Bill O'Fallon Trust Fund knows that, we haven't spent, this is probably $50-something million on this spreadsheet, so maybe just say the Bill O'Fallon Trust created, 2 years ago.
Sure, and then
part
how
of
this
this.
reflects all projects.
That this reflects all
All
projects.
capital projects.
Correct,
Okay.
yeah.
Not a problem. Okay. Okay, any other questions? Okay. Then the next section we have, these are our line items through New World. So these are the actual reports, the budget reports that are, we enter into our financial software. Unless, I can point out a few, major things or differences that are in here. Most of them are pretty self-explanatory. We did include comments, so it kind of helped you understand if you see something. One thing I did want to point out is under the resident assistance program, so on page 1. So we had talked back in January about our resident assistance program for the Ameren and how they were getting close to running out. Well, they have ran out. We've been continually getting the reports based on, again, we have another 2 months to go, but based on projections, kind of based on where we were last year and what we're looking at, we felt that an additional $15,000 would be needed to really help offset those additional costs. So we did increase the resident assistance program to $65,000 compared to the $50,000. So I know that was something we did discuss. So we did put in that additional $15,000. You know, in the general fund, really, there's not much difference. We already talked about IT during our regular meeting last January. We talked about IT. Dan Gentry was here and was available for questions. Let's see. There's nothing really IT related. We talked about that. The Bill O'Fallon Trust Fund. So when you see starting it's under 05, Bill O'Fallon Trust Fund, you'll see where we have our miscellaneous grants coming in. This is our revenues that represent the OSLOD grant, you know, the MEPRD. So those are all listed as revenues. You'll see here's that transfer from various reserves. So we'll be taking the capital reserves from parks, some cash reserves from parks, strategic plan, $282,000 for the trail, economic development. We're transferring $600,000 for the community park enhancement for the amphitheater and other enhancements. And then again, the bond proceeds, which are in their own fund, but we do have to transfer those. So that's where you see the revenues. And then you'll see again, transfer from reserves represents projects from last year we're carrying over, and other current spending, the slide, et cetera. Expense-wise, again, keep in mind that due to that quarter-cent tax, the state does keep 1.5% as an administrative fee. So we reflect the full revenue, but then we reflect the service charge. So that's what that 1.5% represents. The carryover, the Hesse Park, is the pickleball courts. And then the community park renovations, enhancements, whatever you want to call it. There is the total, the 9,948. And again, this is where we're showing the MEPRD grant, the economic development. This is how it's being funded. And then the pool project, where we show, again, the OSLAD capital reserves and the Bill O'Fallon Trust, the 850 for the slide. So then when we go into 51, which is economic development, that basically, you know, that represents, you know, as we're showing the increase in hotel motel tax revenues, we show as expenses. We do have an SIUE grad, which we put under contracted services, an intern. We do utilize that. We have the tax rebates, and that is for the Drury Inn and the Hilton that we provide the hotel tax rebates on. We have signage, $60,000, which you'll see is for the Memorial Corner signage and paving, replacement of overhead lights. Debt service are the bond payments for the sports park projects. And then continuing down, we have the transfers for development projects You'll see those. For the facade program, we have that in there, 50,000 for that. And then we have downtown, that's the 40,000 for the downtown facade. We have an impact study and demographics report for the sports park, downtown, and O'Fallon General. So those are projects within the 05. We also have 50,000 for the West O'Fallon facade program. And that will be discussed more in detail at the March 11th Community Development Committee meeting. And then we go into Fund 78. So this fund, strategic plan, this is a fund that was started basically when Menards came on board. Because it was additional new revenue, we chose about 200,000 that we said was above and beyond. So every year we have moved $200,000 out of that sales tax into the 78, which is, we call the Strategic Plan Fund. And if you recall, this is really used for kind of like one-time projects, mostly for studies, things along that line that kind of fit along with our strategic plan goals. So this year, we do have quite a few. This is a National Citizen Survey. We are going to be looking at a new ERP system, which is our financial utility billing software. We're going to be looking at a possible upgrade on that. Our new one is not going to be supported, so we're looking. An economic development impact study that I talked about, St. Ellen Mine feasibility study, community development, the code updates, the Forward 50 with those plans, possibly doing something with that, and then the Pierce Street doing some calming, continuing what we had talked about with the Pierce Street calming measures. There's also 50,000 in for the license plates readers at West O'Fallon. And so that makes up, so there are quite a few projects this year out of the strategic plan. TIF, most of those are basically redevelopment, going back to the developer and also the TIF surplus. So we pay the developer and then the TIF surplus distribution. The only thing there is downtown in the downtown Central City. We did put funds in there. That's where some of the facade comes from. And then downtown improvements, the lighting, when I talked under 51, that's where a lot of those projects are being paid out of the TIF. And then the rest, library, again, that is really approved by their library board. They are part of the city, but they are managed by the board and they do have their approval, but we do like to include it so you do see their budget as well. And then the rest of these really are just the rest of the accounts. We included and there's 12, you'll see those are our bonds for the pool. It's basically there's no other major account. We have all of our other SSAs. So unless anybody has any specific questions, I won't go into the other ones unless you saw something that you'd like to be looked at.
All right, thank you, Sandy.
Okay, and then the other thing that we have, if there's none on the line item, one thing that we started, this is a strategic plan progress update, and this will be something that Grant and Cameron have been working on. So this is basically our strategic plan and the progress, is it budgeted? Is it in progress? Is it complete? So again, it's a great tool to look at so you as a council are aware of where do we stand with all of our projects for the strategic plan. So very easy to look at, very easy to decipher what is going on with the projects. Any questions on those?
Any questions from anybody on the committee?
Not a question, but a comment. I really like that strategic plan update. The layout is very easy to read, it's not overwhelming, and it gives a really good snapshot. So thank you for that.
Great job, Cameron.
Yeah, I'll second that.
Okay?
Anyone
And
else?
that's all I have on the budget unless there's questions.
You don't want to read every line item?
Nope.
Anybody else want that? All right. If there's no more on that, any from the
I've got-
council? Oh,
Well, I've got a question.
Jessica's got a question.
It's been discussed before about the disabled veterans exemption potential reimbursement. You want to talk about that?
No, I was just going to, we have accounted for it, however, it's in the budget, and again, that could be something we look at, should it not come. We are expecting it to come this year.
Okay.
You know, we don't have, again, as I mentioned, it's January, it's out of our control now. It is now, the county did their job, it's up with IDOR. We don't know when it will be distributed. Our hope is this next fiscal year. And then we'll have to see, you know, if it continues, again, it's a 5-year pilot program. This only represented 50%, so we're gonna have to see if we get the full amount, and then we'll do some investigation, how much total was distributed so that we know going forward, is this the same amount or can we increase that amount? But it is accounted for in this.
So when you say it's accounted for, it's included in the revenues, and because we have a balanced budget, there's also some expense put against it?
No, no expense. It's all part of the general fund revenues. So, and that's how we're also able to put in, you know, to help get our reserves back built up. So it is revenue that is accounted for here. So, you know, the DAV, which again, I have a new report, it's up to 140 million for disabled vets. It's again coming off of, so when we do our tax levy next year, that will be accounted for because it will reduce the amount that how do I just say it? So it just spread out more for those have to make up for that 140 million.
Okay, so I guess my question is, so if the money comes in from the state,
Correct.
it seems to me that there may be some people on the council that are interested in not spending that money, but instead somehow rebating.
Correct. And once
It doesn't
we get
seem
it-
as easy as that, but you know what I
Right.
mean? Like, a smaller percent of people have been paying more tax, and so there's
Correct.
some interest in how we handle that money if we get it quote-unquote reimbursed. So can you talk about what
Right.
that looks like?
So at this point, it's only as a revenue because nothing is accounted for, you know, and by, again, having a reserve, it means we're not going to spend that money until it's decided what happened. So it will be brought up, once we get that check, it'll be presented, you know, to the council saying, we received X amount, how do you want to handle it? So I think it was kind of put on hold as far as what wants to be done with it.
Okay, roger that.
But it's not, there's no expense right now associated with it. Correct.
And correct me if I'm wrong, it's really going to take 2 years before we see half of it and then realize, did it max out the budget? Are we going to get the full amount of what we would?
Correct. So
Expect.
this projection is based on that 50%. And so it'll be next year before, it's supposed to be 100%, but we don't know if we'll get that full.
Because there's 15 million that's allotted.
Correct.
And once that runs out, they've got to pare it down. So that's something else we can't really, we can guess at it, but don't really know. Another thing I wanted to bring up was I'll jump on you in a second, Mayor, but was the community where we donate back, where the charities, the 65,000
Resident assistance.
resident assistance. One of the reasons they moved that up to 65,000 in the budget was because the electric, as you've all seen, has gone up quite a bit. So that was eating into the budget. So we were able to help a lot less people with the same amount. So with the prices of electric going up, they felt raising it up to 65,000 made a lot of sense. It wasn't a huge major increase, but it could help a lot more people out. So that was kind of the reasoning behind that. Mayor?
Sandy, you may want to touch upon, even though the amount is going up of the exemptions, the amount of funds coming from the state is a fixed amount. It's capped at 15 million.
Correct. Yep. That was mentioned. So the 15 million, so if all the other 2 counties, if we exceed 15 million, we're not going to get that full amount. It's capped at the 15. And that's how he has it in his budget for the next couple of years.
Thank you. Anybody else on the committee or council have a comment? Public? Ron?
Ron Selms, Ward 6. Thanks, Ms. Lotz, for asking that question. It was an email that I had sent, and I think that clarified it pretty well, because I saw a $280,000 line item and a $66,000 line item, which I thought was probably for the veterans exemption. I didn't know whether or not that was expensed, to balance the budget or not, so it strictly is just a revenue.
It's strictly revenue.
Great, that's super. Do you have any idea, Sandy, of that 15 million, what percentage is actually going to school districts, since they're the ones that were mostly impacted by this exemption? Or could you tell based on the formula or not? I didn't know based on the formula.
No. I
Okay.
mean, they did provide an idea. I don't have
I would
that with
assume the
me.
bulk of it, the
Right.
bulk of it is going to the
It's
schools
because it's
where it should
based on
be.
their EAV
Right.
and their percentage.
And the fact that they can't tap into that EAV that's
Correct.
set aside. Okay, great. The other, you had brought up about the utility billing software, I think.
Correct.
That was always one question I always wanted to ask, and I keep forgetting. Any chance when they update that, they'll go to paperless billing and what that might save in terms of postage? I mean, most
Well,
utilities do
we
paperless.
offer paperless billing now.
You do? I did
Oh, yeah.
not know that.
Yes, you can definitely sign up and you
Good
can.
thing I asked the question.
Yes, you can
Okay.
opt not to get it. Everything can be electronic. You can get it electronic.
Okay.
You can
Maybe
pay
worthwhile putting on
online.
one of the statements coming up to let people know. I mean, seriously, I didn't know
Definitely,
that
yeah.
was
We've
an
been
option.
doing that for several years. I mean, we have auto draft. We highly
Yeah, I do
recommend
autodraft.
auto
I
draft.
didn't know we could do
You can
paperless.
check your bill online. You can pay it online, and you can do
Great.
paperless.
Great, thanks.
Thanks, Ron. Anybody else from the public? All right. If not, we'll move on. Let's see here. 3.3, the update on the Residents Assistance Tax Force.
Basically, I touched base on this. Funds for the Ameren portion is gone. We still have about 16.5 left in water. So I know talking with the groups, they'll start, we'll pay your water, but you need to pay your electric. I mean, we do have funds available. So we will, we do continue to monitor, so we'll see where they stand. That's all I have on that.
Thank you. All right. Treasurer's report.
Again, 3.4, 3.5, 3.6 are all informational. These are our quarterly budget to actuals and the quarterly investments. The treasurer's report is our monthly report. And then 3.7 is our administration committee reports. This is something fairly new we started. We, under administration, we give you an idea of utility billing, any of our grants, wastewater management report. We do our atomic dust digital marketing. HR gives an update, and then our city clerk as well. So those are all, nice little informational that you can look at, but none unless there's questions.
Any questions for Sandy on those? Council, committee? Oh, come on up, bro.
Vern Moore, Ward 3. The general fund sheet that I had printed out, is that pretty well correct, was printed out in service for now?
General fund, I'm not sure, what sheet is that, sir?
It's got the general fund, ambulance, fire,
The treasurer's report,
okay, is that what we're dealing with now, right here?
any of them.
Okay. So on this report, I noticed on here, each one of these line items has a cash on hand item. Is that correct? And that's the cash you have on hand?
Correct?
So if I total all those up, that would tell me how much cash on hand you would have?
For these major accounts.
Right.
Right.
So give or take the 222,000 of the minus on there. So the cash on hand we have is over 70 million, right? Okay,
Plus some, yeah.
plus. I just want to let the public know that.
Okay, but you also have to look at the 3% reserve and the 10% emergency. So yes, there may be cash on hand, but our financial policies also say we need to keep 3-month operating and a 10% emergency. So you're right, you can look at cash on hand.
Thanks, Vern. Any other questions from the public?
I do have one other.
And Sandy?
Sorry, one other thing that's not on the agenda that just found out. I mentioned the tax levy. So we did get an update from the county. Last time in January, I said we hadn't heard anything. The current report I just received does show they did put a lot of our EAV on the rolls. So we're looking at approximately estimated EAV for 2023, about 897 million. The report that we had estimated for back in November was 840 million. So it is an increase, which would mean that based on that estimated EAV, our rate should be approximately 0.786 compared to what we had originally estimated in November of 0.82. So that is with the library, and that's the lowest we've had for many years. But it's still not the final report. We'll get that probably end of March.
Nothing like playing with numbers you don't really know what they are.
Yep.
All right. If nobody else has got anything, we'll move to public comments. Any public comments, feel free to come up. Anything considering finance or administration? If not, I'll ask for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Got a motion? Can I get a second?
Second.
Got a motion second. All in favor? Say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes. We are adjourned. Thank you.
Community Development Committee meeting will begin at
I know.
6:15.
How about that?
All right, I have 6:15. I'm going to call the Community Development Committee to order. Justin, if we could do a roll call, please.
Absolutely. Chairman Roach?
Here.
Campbell? Albrecht? Vorse?
Here.
Parchman? Small here.
Here.
You have a quorum, sir.
All right, thank you. First up is approval of the minutes. It's been a while since we met, so December 11th was the last minutes. Those are attached. I would look for approval.
So moved.
Second?
Motion is second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed, nay? All right, minutes approved. First agenda item 2.1, this is ordinance amending ordinance 623 zoning development known as Pinch, thank you, North America, located at 141 Auto Court.
Thank you. So this is a redevelopment of the first property in the auto court area, which is the old Offenburg dealerships. The property is located at 141 Auto Court. It is a existing building. It's Zone B2, which is interesting in this particular area, and it's a regional commercial designation. And essentially what the application is seeking to do is go in and renovate the existing buildings that exist at that location. What Pinch does is they have a railroad light manufacturing and assembly group. They make the gate arms for the crossings at railroad and street crossings, as well as some of the equipment boxes. They do some sensors for the rail lines so that they know if they're icy or in bad condition. And so they'll operate out of the building there, and then along with that, they've asked for about 13,000 square feet of outdoor storage. They're going to screen that with a privacy fence like we would any other outdoor storage. Yeah, they'll still have over 80 parking spaces, so they'll meet all the requirements there. They're not changing any of the parking lot lighting. None of the utilities are changing. The sidewalk's already there. They're going to be reusing signage on the building. And so staff and the Planning Commission have recommended approval of this particular redevelopment with a condition that the storage lot would need to be fenced with a 6-foot vinyl privacy fence.
All right, thank you, Justin. Any questions or comments from the committee? From the council? Ross?
I was just curious why they picked that building out of all of them.
Out of all of them, it sets up best for them in terms of their manufacturing processes, and it's got large garage doors. This was an old building that Offenburg used for like their paint booths, their photo booths inside, do some minor repairs. So it's got the big garage doors and stuff like that that help them in their process.
All right, thank you. Any other comments or questions from the council? All right, from the public? All right, hearing none, I would entertain a motion to approve.
So moved?
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion from the committee? All right, hearing none, roll call, please.
Campbell.
Yes.
Albrecht. Vorse.
Yes.
Parchman.
Yes.
Small here.
Yes.
Roach.
Yes.
All right, so this will move on to city council next week, and then back to committee in 2 weeks.
All right, thank you. Next up, 2.2, ordinance amending ordinance 623, zoning development known as Calvary Church, located at 1033 Hartman Lane.
All right, this is the planned use application for Calvary Church. The subject property is at 1033 Hartman Lane. The property is just over 5.5 acres and is surrounded by an assortment of residential, commercial, and office uses. It is currently vacant, but was previously used as single-family residences. Looking at our current zoning map, the subject property is zoned as A, agricultural. And for future land use map, this is designated as office. We've listed out the key items of each phase, as there's 2 development phases. For phase 1 is the meeting rooms and offices. With the frontage along Hartman Lane, this section of Hartman Lane is under St. Clair County jurisdiction. So to construct the driveway access points, they will need to coordinate and receive approval from St. Clair County to construct those drive access aisles. Included in phase one is constructing the first phase parking spaces and sidewalk proportionate with the parking area, and then also removing the gravel driveways and access. Phase two will be the welcome center and the offices, as well as the primary assembly space, and constructing the second phase of parking spaces and sidewalk. For access and circulation, again, the access points on Hartman Lane will be in a section of Hartman Lane that's under St. Clair County jurisdiction, so they will need their approval and coordination. With parking for places of assembly, parking is typically calculated based on ICC occupant load or number of seats in the assembly space. However, the applicant proposed an alternative parking plan with this development. They reference the ITE parking manual, which recommends a certain number of spaces for Sundays for church uses, as the Sunday is the peak visitor day for church use. So that is the number that they use to calculate their number of parking spaces. For parking lot lighting, the photometric plan included in the application meets our minimum requirements. Looking at the concept elevation, we can see that the development uses a mixture of materials and meets our design guidelines. For utilities, water is provided by City of O'Fallon, sewer is provided by Caseyville Sewer, electric and gas is provided by Ameren, telephone and internet is provided by Charter. For drainage, there's two key improvements for this proposal. First is the expansion of the lake at the northwest section of the property. That is to increase the amount of capacity for drainage. And second, there will be grading improvements to encourage runoff towards the lake that has increased capacity. And again, for sidewalk, the sidewalk improvements will be broken up in two phases along the frontage of each parking phase. So it'll go the entire frontage of the first parking space construction, and again, this following with the second. For landscaping, the landscaping plan meets our minimum requirements, including the appropriate use of buffering and screening to reduce the impacts of vehicle light onto the multifamily areas to the south and west of the development. There's no signage included in this application, so that any future signage will be required to meet our minimum or our standard sign requirements. The development is aligned with our 2040 master plan by being compatible with the residential area, utilizing an alternative parking plan, and activating a underutilized parcel in a already built up area. That concludes my presentation. I'll move on. Okay. Staff recommends the approval of the planned use with the following conditions. Approval of the alternative parking plan. Developer will coordinate with St. Clair County and to obtain the necessary permits for the reconstruction of the drive aisles. The sidewalks along Hartman Lane will be constructed proportionate to the phase of development, and the existing gravel driveways will need to be removed within the first phase of development.
All right, thank you. And one question, and I don't have an issue with the alternative parking plan, but Justin, if you could just maybe talk to why our standards are such a drastically different compared to the otherwise use.
Yeah, absolutely. So what we've found is most churches, if you would calculate the parking based on a pew system, a seating system that has pews that are fixed, those numbers come drastically down. But most churches, much like this room here, used to have pews. We've gotten rid of that so that it can be used in multiple different functions. And so when you do that and there's no fixed seating, the code goes to this ICC area. And so in the ICC, when you have a room like this, it determines the amount of people that can be in this space based on 3 square foot per person. And so what happens is, even though, you know, everybody's kind of spaced out in here, the ICC looks at it and says, you have this little 3-foot bubble around you, and you can pack as many of those people in there. And so then our parking calculations escalate rather quickly, even though most of the space is dead space most of the time. So that's where we've seen those parking counts just escalate very quickly, and pretty much unrealistic to how that building's actually going to be used.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments from the committee?
Do you have any idea how long it'll be before Phase 2 starts, after Phase 1 is complete?
The development team and the pastor are here. They may be best suited to answer that. It was not brought up in the initial thing, but.
All right, any other questions or comments from the council?
I have one.
Oh, I'm sorry, thank you. Go ahead, Chair.
Yeah, why wouldn't you construct the sidewalk along Hartman Lane all at one time? Rather than,
They've asked for it to help with cost-cutting measures. In all reality, the sidewalk's going to go to nowhere. There's no sidewalk further north
So
of
it's
this
gonna go nowhere
development.
shorter.
Yeah, and then as they develop it, then they could add that next phase.
Thank you. Any other questions from the council? Anything from the public? All right. Hearing none, I entertain a motion for approval.
So moved.
Second?
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion from the committee? Hearing none, roll call, please.
Albrecht. Yes. Force.
Yes.
Parchman.
Yes.
Smallhair.
Yes.
Roach.
Yes.
Campbell.
Yes.
All right. And again, this will move on to committee next week and then, or sorry, council next week and then to committee in 2 weeks.
All right, next up, 2.3, special event permit, request for the hot rods for Hope Cargo.
Yes, so this is a resubmittal of an event that was supposed to occur last fall. Some of the organizers couldn't get a few of the things done in time, so they've asked to move the event to, oops, sorry. I don't know why that keeps going. All right, to Thursday, May 2nd. From 5:30 to 11. Again, nothing's really changed. It's between First Street, or on First Street from Cherry to Lincoln. They are going to have a live band. They are going to use the Class L liquor license with First Street and Peel Pizza serving food and alcohol. They have met with our downtown district and O'Fallon PD, and they've addressed all the concerns of the reviewing team. They're estimating about 600 attendees. And this is sort of the location for the car show. They've got the Keishi group coming out along the First Street as well. And so we've recommended approval with obviously the need for First Street and Peel Pizza to apply for their Class L liquor license. They also have begun working on notifying surrounding businesses so that they're aware of the event, and then our standard public safety condition for inclement weather.
All right, thank you. Any, yes, Jerry.
yeah, I thought that as part of the application process, they had to talk to the surrounding businesses.
We just wanted to make sure it was a part of the conditions,
Well,
but
but I
yes, it
thought
is.
Our approval depended on having that approval with the surrounding businesses done when they do the application.
We have not typically done that. It's part of the approval process in its totality.
I think that's a change.
Not since I've been here.
So what happens if one of them objects?
Try to work through whatever issues that they have with it, yeah.
I suppose, Jerry, what could happen is between this approval from the committee and the council's approval, we could request that they get that taken care of so that it comes before the council with.
I mean, we can reach out to them and tell them they need to discuss it with them. I mean, we don't have like a form that says that they've, there's not a consent essentially. It's just making sure that they're aware of it. So, and just so you know, they have been with the downtown district, so the group has sat down with the chamber and the leadership of the downtown district and have had it okayed through them.
Go ahead.
So, Justin, what dictates the need for toilet facilities in events like this?
Typically when they don't have any access to indoor facilities.
Okay, because that's the only part blocked off. And the only businesses open in that block will be Peel and First Street. And they're saying that estimated could be 600 people. I mean, I don't know
if you want porta potties added, we can
well,
add
that's just like,
porta-potties.
is that something like, what's that tipping point where it's going to be, because people will be crossing the street to get to them and going into other businesses, and, if it's just easier, or is it something we need to look at, like at this, type of event, it's deemed necessary automatically?
Yeah.
Because that's all they have in there, if deemed necessary.
At this point, they aren't proposing to have them, so I
just think with that type of predicted attendance, it wouldn't necessarily be the worst idea to just go ahead and get them.
To Andrea's point, let's assume for a minute they had an event that didn't have bathrooms access. How would you calculate how many porta potties they would need?
Usually it's kind of by the event sponsor.
Oh,
what
okay.
they
We don't
feel.
have
We
any.
don't have we've not typically.
The 3-foot bubble.
Because what I
Yeah,
just
we
think.
haven't typically had a requirement for the bathroom facilities.
Because I just see a lot of crossing of road when you may not need that if you just had them accessible right there in that block.
600 people can rent a lot of beer in an hour.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to add that as a condition, we can certainly communicate that to the applicant.
I'm fine with adding that if the rest of the committee is. All right. Seems like we would like that before it comes to the council to have that added.
Got it.
All right. Any other questions from the council? Public? Yes, sir.
Vern Moyer, Ward 3. As a member of the O'Fallon Historical Society, we have the caboose, which is directly behind where the music thing is at there. And I'm not speaking for them, I'm just asking a question, okay? I don't believe we were contacted letting us know, this is the first time we're hearing about it, that they're coming about with this. I know the caboose is there, it's our property, but it sits on city ground. My question is, what do we have to do to protect the caboose from whatever's going to maybe be occurring there? Of course, we didn't get notice on it. I'm just wondering, I mean, you're going to have the band stand right there in front of it, is that correct?
Yeah, that's the plan, is that it would be in front of it, not on it or around.
I mean, I know that, but, people may end up on it, then where's the liability fall?
So, good question. We've had other events using the same area. Have we, had any issues? B, have we had any precautions done before?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay. No.
I'm just throwing it out there, I'm just asking, because, we've had other events, it's been okay, but this is maybe a little bit different, I don't know. I mean, you're gonna have 600 people there, you're gonna have a lot of booze and whatever, so Katie bar the door, you know what I'm saying? I don't know what's gonna happen, you just don't either.
Yeah.
So I'm just putting that out there to find out, which we do
I mean, we have insurance, and that would be our, I mean, in all reality, we carry insurance for those types of things.
Okay.
Yeah, and I'm assuming, Vern, if the Historical Society wanted to put up some type of barrier, you could coordinate with the event, you know,
Okay, I mean,
coordinators.
just, put something around it, whatever, okay.
Yeah,
happy
maybe
days.
some construction, temporary construction fencing. I
Yeah,
don't know.
okay.
Yep. All right, thank you. Any other comments from the public? All right. In any further, I'm sorry, entertain a motion for approval?
So moved.
Second?
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion from the committee?
And we'll make sure that we address the porta potty issue and try to get them moving along with notifying their neighbors this week.
Great, thank you. All right, no further discussion. Roll call, please.
Force.
Yes.
Parchman. Small here.
Yes.
Roach.
Yes.
Campbell. Albrecht.
Yes.
All right, and again, this will move to committee, or council, next week.
All right, thank you. And 3.1, community development budget.
Yeah, so our community development budget, fortunately for us, is much smaller portion than of what Sandy presented to you earlier. But I wanted to pull this up so you could see it. We do have, did you share the screen, Grant? Or did I? Okay, here we go. There we go. All right, so our budget went up just a little bit, about 8% overall. Just a couple little things that we are looking at doing. We've been working very diligently in our in our code enforcement, in derelict properties. We've been really focusing on getting liens put on them for the services that we render on those properties. Currently, it's pretty archaic, the way that we do that. We literally have to get an invoice together, get a check cut, drive down to the courthouse, file the lien. They do have a system that allows us to do that from the comfort of our offices. The amount that it's going to cost, it's about $1,500. We can make that up pretty much within a couple weeks of going down to the courthouse. You know, it takes time for Chad to go down there. And so we feel like that's going to be a nice benefit. It helps us to manage those things a little bit easier. Speaking of code enforcement, one of the things that we talked about previously is we're recommending to move our part-time code enforcement position into a full-time position. Based on our counts for code enforcement, we've grown exponentially. And I don't know where it all comes from. It's not all just the app, so it's not just the ease of doing it. It's just people have become more aware since the pandemic, I think, and we've continued to see a rise. And it's not as just simple as, hey, cut your grass. We've got to go verify the claim, we got to send a letter, we've got to then go back out to make sure it's not, and then if it gets into a court system, we're talking months and months of each case taking time out of our staff. So we saw some good success with our part-time position. Unfortunately, he has taken a position with the Postal Service, but we are hopeful to find a good candidate to come back as a full-time position. What we are requesting of the committee is, and just kind of notifying you guys, and if you don't have a big problem with it in the council, we'd like to go ahead and post that now for our full-time position. It just doesn't make any sense to post something as a part-time position for, a month and a half. get the interviews done and then say, oh, hey, by the way, we're going full-time with your position. So we would like to go ahead and post that as a full-time position. I don't know if any of the council members have an issue with that, but for the amount of money that we spend on code enforcement officers and the return that we get, we feel like it's a great service that we provide. So other than that, everything else is pretty much status quo, little ups and downs in our budget just to address where we've gone over the last couple years. But any questions of that? Any thoughts on getting that full-time position posted?
Well, I think it's necessary, given that you've picked up a lot of stuff fire department wasn't doing that needed to be done. I think from that perspective, I think getting somebody on board sooner rather than later benefits the whole city.
Okay.
I would agree.
Is there any issue that it wouldn't pass? I guess if we can pass the budget.
I mean, yeah, I don't.
Because we wouldn't hire somebody and then.
Yeah, I mean, I don't see, and that's why we're asking the council. I mean, it would be just part of the budget and. So.
Okay.
And we have money in this year's budget with him not working for the last month or so. We can make up whatever money offsets right now.
All right. Any other questions from the committee, council, public? All right.
We need to make that a formal proposal.
I don't think so, do we?
Well, I think we're okay.
Yeah. All right. Then our last item is just opening it up for any public comment. So any additional public comment for the committee? Anybody besides Roy online? All right. Then I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second?
All right. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? We are adjourned.
Public Works Committee will begin at 6:45 p.m. Thank you.
I couldn't tell if that was a sneeze or a cough. That's a question. Thank you. You're welcome.
All right, I got, oh, that clock says 6:45. Are we? All right, I got 6:45. Hello? Thank you. It's 6:45, so we'll open the meeting. Jeff, roll call, please.
Rosenberg.
Present.
Mylert.
Here.
Roach. Here. Carney is absent. Van Hook, he's online but unable to attend in person. Hudson.
Here.
All right, you have a quorum.
Thank you, sir. The draft minutes for the November 27th, that was a long time ago, meeting are attached. I'll take a motion to approve.
So moved. Second.
Got a motion, and a second. Anybody got any questions or concerns regarding the minutes? No? All those in favor of them passing, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Minutes passed. Jeff, item 2.1.
2.1 is a resolution authorizing the mayor to execute an agreement with Millennia Professional Services of Illinois, LTD, for the Deer Creek subdivision drainage study in the amount of $48,400. So committee may recall this is an item that was discussed at the last committee. The intent at that point was to have a proposal put together, take it directly to city council. At that meeting, there was some discussion as to kind of how we got to this point, so I thought it'd be important we revisit this in a committee discussion. I've kind of put together a short little presentation that I'll share here and just kind of go through the history of this subdivision, how it came to be, and essentially where we're at now. So, let me see. First off, there was a lot of discussion as to why we're calling it a certain name. It was called Deer Creek Road, it was called Deer Creek Study. There was comments made, well, it's Ingle Creek, let's call it Ingle Creek. Ingle Creek's over 6 miles long, right? So we try to, when we do these studies, we try to narrow it down to specifically where the study's occurring. This, what you see before you, is the preliminary plat for the Deer Creek subdivision when it was first proposed back in January of 1988. So thought it'd be important, change the name, call it the Deer Creek Subdivision Study, because it's mainly centered on this one location. The main thing that's going to be studied is the culvert system that's under Seven Hills Road that conveys Ingle Creek under Seven Hills. You'll see one thing that stood out when I pulled up this preliminary plat, the dark black line that's curving through the site that encompasses all of the 15 lots on the south side of Deer Creek. That was, at the time that it was proposed, the 100-year floodplain limits. That, as best they could guess where it fell. Not a full detailed study by FEMA, nothing was approved. So one thing I wanted to point out, the way we're set up now with our new development code that's within this next slide, chapter 158 is zoning. We've established these riparian corridors along creeks, along streams like this, to where those 15 homes, if this was proposed today, wouldn't have been able to be built. We have a 300-foot wide zone within those, along those drainage ways that don't allow development. But again, it was approved and allowed back in the late 80s. So moving forward, after it was approved, after the homes were built, the flood insurance rate maps were established through FEMA. They were updated. This one, the map number on here is specifically listed. Anyone can go online, this link I provided, look up these floodplain maps and see how they're established and where they fall. In 2003, that's when the effective map was done. In the early mid-2000s, the city decided, we hired Gary Holscher with now Millennia, to do a full detailed study of all of Ingle Creek, all of Rock Springs Branch. In doing that, it's quite the process with FEMA, multiple years to get them approved. Those maps went effective in 2010, and I'll show you the difference between those. So here's the map in 03. It's a Zone A. Zone A means there's a floodplain there, but there's no base flood elevation established. It's just saying, this is the general area of where the floodplain is located. And just to give you an idea of the tributary area to this culvert, here's kind of just an area of the whole city that drains to that one spot. You're roughly 4.5 square miles. So when this detailed study was done in the early 2000s, and they ultimately became effective in 2010, this was the new map that was established. And what you can see here, and Mr. Pfeiffer referenced this in some of his past comments, you have a 7-foot increase in the base flood elevation from the downstream end of that culvert to the upstream. What that's telling you is that culvert system's holding back that stormwater, having it build up head on the upstream end, which in turn raises the 100-year flood elevation. So when this was studied back in 2000, this was determined. It then placed all 15 of those homes in the floodplain with a new established flood elevation. The city went and paid for elevation certificates to be done to determine if any of those homes could be removed from the floodplain. What we found was really only 3 of the 15 were able to be removed. So when we started talking about the study and how we're going to develop it and what it's going to include, reached out to Gary Holscher, being that Millennia, his firm that he's with, has all this data already. They've already analyzed this entire drainage way, all the way from Silver Creek to the headwaters of it. So they have this data. They confirmed that their numbers they provided match what's proposed in the future flood maps. So right now there's a preliminary flood insurance rate map that's going through the process of being approved. Gary took the time to look at those numbers, confirm their flows are still the ones that we established back in the early 2000s. And then from that, we were able to kind of develop this proposal and this scope that you see before you tonight. So that's kind of the history of how we've gotten to this point on this property. If there's any questions related to that, I'd be happy to answer them before we kind of get into the proposal.
You, come on up and ask your question.
I've got some issues with all your information. It's great, after 30 years, 20 years, it's the first time I'm seeing his little line for the base flood elevation lines. I've never seen that before, that map, the first one that shows it. I've got documentation from the city and FEMA that established base flood elevations when I bought my property. That established it, that allowed me to be out of the floodplain when I bought my property. Go back one more. That's the first time I'm seeing those maps and that overlay. The maps I have and the overlay I have that don't match that at all.
So what was done when the homes were built, that was the floodplain before anything was developed. As each home was built, elevation certificates were done to confirm that the homes were constructed above the flood elevation that was known at that time.
Okay, so the base flood elevation then changed, and it's not from one into the other. My contention is my base flood elevation has changed 7 feet. That has always been my contention, not because I think it's actually more from one into the other. I haven't looked at that. But this is the first time that I'm seeing these maps and that layout, because the layout I have doesn't show that. And I have documentation that says I am out of the base flood elevation. Those dates, you say that the city didn't have that at the time. They did. They approved those maps. It is on the maps, the base flood elevations.
And we have that data. Yeah, we have the elevation certificates of each property when it was built.
Okay, so they were established then?
It was established based off of studies that weren't founded by FEMA or any sort of mapping at the time. Correct.
Okay, so the city had that at the time. So don't tell me you didn't have it.
I'm not saying we don't.
To have conversation,
Okay,
I get that you're upset. I get that you're upset. But to have conversation, one, you can't be talking over people.
Okay.
And when he says something, or somebody
All right.
says something, all
Got
right,
it.
just,
Go ahead.
Yeah. Dave, I can't speak to what was done in the 80s. I wasn't here. I don't know exactly every detail of it. I know we do have on file upstairs an elevation certificate of when your home was initially built that showed it was above the flood elevation that was known at that time. But as you can see, in 2003, after your home was built, there were no base flood elevations established. It's a Zone A. That means there's no elevations known through a detailed study. That wasn't done until later in the early 2000s when the city paid to have the creek analyzed, and that's when this 2010 analysis showed that that's what that culvert is causing, that high water elevation.
that map established base flood elevations.
In
I've got a letter of map amendment that shows established by FEMA a base flood elevation.
And again, I can speak to what I know. I know Gary Holscher is here tonight. If we have any more specific questions on what was studied in the 2000s, he can talk to that. What he can't really talk about is what happened back in the 80s when it was initially approved, because he wasn't part of that and can't really go into
And
detail.
no-
Ultimately,
and
where
nobody
we're
up here
at
was a part of
is, what I'm trying to present tonight is a proposal to try to solve these issues that are going on out there. To do
Understand.
studies, to analyze that culvert, what is the best options for replacement of it that in turn can, number one, prevent any homes from flooding. That's number one goal. Two, I think a bonus would be of it is if we could change those flood elevations to lower them below any of the openings of the homes. Now, I can't say if that's going to be able to be accomplished or not until the study's done. But those are going to be the two main goals of the study. In addition, trying to really determine the impact of doing those changes, right? I mean, we go out there today and say, let's put a bridge there and not hold back any water whatsoever, right? We can do that. It's going to cost probably a couple $1 million, maybe $3 million to do it, but what we don't understand and don't have a understanding of is what is it going to do upstream and downstream? Because I know you've come to a lot of these meetings talk about erosion. Opening that up and allowing that water to flow through there unrestricted is only going to add to erosion. So we need to analyze that, come up with a mitigation plan to prevent any additional erosion from occurring by whatever is done at that structure.
Okay,
So
great.
that's what's in this proposal that we want to move forward with.
As well, there are going to be a couple of other projects discussed that will also assist in that are, I'm going to use the term upstream, I don't know whether it's upstream, but to the west, that are going to help alleviate some of the water that ends up down there by slowing it down as well. So not only the study that Jeff's going to talk about first, but there are other things that are happening that are going to help assist with it as well. So we're going to get there. You've been heard, and we're going to get there. It's not going to happen today.
Okay, well, if we don't at least address it today, okay?
We're
So
gonna-
you mentioned that the study of this culvert, so we don't dump this water down here. The city's done that twice now. When they put the oversized culvert on Smiley, and they put the oversized culvert on Deer Creek Road, when they put this Smiley through, or Deer Creek Road through. There weren't any studies like this when they done that, when those bridges were put in. And all that water was dumped in our backyards through those. When you look at this, and if you want me to address it now, but I'd rather do it after you put the study up.
Well,
there.
then let us,
Okay, but this information is new, and base flood elevations were established. This doesn't look at why they changed. It just says, well, they just changed. They changed because of lack of management upstream.
They changed because the initial studies didn't account for the culvert under Seven Hills
Nothing
Road.
that shows that those studies were wrong. Those base elevations, were what we had to go with, and those were established, and they have changed because of other factors, and that's what I want to get with, and that's why I want this to be called the Engle Creek Stormwater Project.
I get your concern about the name.
It's not just a name, it's the scope of the project.
This particular piece of the project deals with just that section. We are going to deal with and address all of it, but this particular study, this particular piece deals with that section. That's why it's named that.
Okay. So I pulled up the proposal just to highlight some of the scope. So in it talks about HECRAS analysis of a proposed bridge with an option 1, which isn't entirely a bridge structure. It's going to mimic plans that were put together back in 2010. So when that base flood elevation was established based off the detailed study the city did, the city took the next step to develop plans to replace that with a bridge. We have a set of plans that have been sitting on the shelf since 2010 for that. The option 2 is to take another look at this and go, determine if we can go back with some sort of a culvert structure, whether it be precast concrete box structure, something like that, that doesn't fully open up the whole cross-section area of the creek. You're still going to hold back some water, but then it's going to be a matter of analyzing that and determining which options would be best to move forward with. And then in addition, like I had mentioned, 4 and 5 talk about erosion mitigation analysis for each one of those options too. So if we do option 1, what are we gonna have to do upstream and downstream? If we do option 2, what are we gonna need to do to prevent any sort of erosion that may occur? So that's the main component of the study. And then along with that, there'll be a written report cost estimates that are established on what each of those options would cost.
All right, that's 2.1, or did you have more you wanted to add?
No,
to
that's everything. I'd recommend approval of this proposal.
All right, so first off, I'm looking for a motion to send it to council. We'll get, hang on, get a motion? We'll have discussion.
So moved.
Second. We have a motion, we have a second. Now, is there any discussion from the committee first? From the council members?
Once again, we discussed several of these things, but it's important that it's Engle Creek because it's it's the watershed.
Okay.
You know, we're addressing one issue and we're not looking at the big picture here. Once again, we got a different name of this thing, okay? Deer Creek doesn't exist, and that's what's on our budget. It's called Deer Creek. It's Engle Creek. It doesn't include the watershed and doesn't address the problems upstream that have caused this. The fact that the statements that we didn't know what the base flood elevations were back when I bought my home, I don't believe that's true. Because I have FEMA documentation that they told me this is what it is through their maps, okay? So the increase of 7 feet came from somewhere, okay? It doesn't address the channelization of the creek, done twice. It doesn't increase the base flood elevations. It doesn't address the oversized culverts upstream. It talks about a sidewalk in one of the things, one of the studies, one sidewalk. Is that sidewalk going to be on the west side of Seven Hills Road? I'm asking because it needs to be in the proposal. If not, it needs to be on the west side of Seven Hills Road.
Is it on the east or west?
Yeah, I mean, it would be wide enough to where it could accommodate sidewalks on both sides if we were to replace it.
If it does, then that needs to be put in the proposal because it only says one. And if it's not on the west side, because that's the side the rest of the city is, and we've been fighting that for years. We have a double crosswalk across there, cars that fly back at 50 miles an hour, and that's a whole nother issue, but we need to solve that too at the same time. So that needs to be here because it talked about the sidewalk, okay? It needs to be on the west side and should be on the proposal, either that or you put it on both sides. Doesn't address the lack of stormwater management, and certainly doesn't address the issues caused by the stormwater's increase over the years upstream. So,
There are going to be some other projects that may hopefully address some of the issues. We'll see when we're done. So I have a motion, I have a second. Is there any other questions or concerns? Roll call, please.
Rosenberg.
Yes.
Mylert.
Yes.
Roach.
Yes.
Hudson.
Yes.
Okay, this proposal will move on to city council next week.
Thank you. 2.2, please.
Okay, 2.2 is a resolution authorizing the mayor to execute an agreement with Millennia Professional Services of Illinois LTD for the North Cherry Street Improvement Project in the amount of $89,400. So this was a project that has been identified in the CIP. It was mainly set up to alleviate flooding of homes that occur at the 600 block of North Cherry. So I was going to pull up the exact page out of the CIP. It's attached to the agenda item. So there's a low spot in the 600 block of Cherry here. Most of these homes are all split level homes where their driveways are relatively flat, the same elevation of the roadway. Heavy rains, the low point in the road can't handle it. It floods these homes. So we had plans in place. We're planning on moving forward with the construction of this project last year. The large rain event occurred in July of last year. We were notified that there was additional flooding that occurred up at the 800 block. So I can pull up this map if you can see it. So north of where Wesley comes through, there's the 800 block of Cherry. Similar situation, low point of the road, split-level homes, flooding in their garages and the lower levels. So we took a step back and said, we really need to look at this whole area comprehensively from a stormwater perspective. Can't really go in and fix one area when we know there's issues in another. So what we're proposing is a whole analysis and improvement to that storm sewer system in this area, in addition to alleviate concerns that were just raised with downstream. The area that's outlined here in red and shaded is city-owned property that used to be the old wastewater treatment plant location. Plan would be to build a stormwater detention facility in there to hold back and slow down any water that would be released downstream. In addition, there's needs in this area for water line replacements and ultimately overlaying of the asphalt streets. So doing it all comprehensively at once makes the most sense. So we're only in there once, disturbing it, and put everything back when we're done. So this would be the engineering to design this, to get it ready to put out the bid, to go to construction. So I'd recommend approval of this agreement.
So this is another one of those things that I was talking about that will assist with alleviating some of the problems downstream. Just another one that will help. I'm looking for a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion, we have a second. Is there any conversation, discussion amongst the committee? Council? Public? Roll call, please.
Mylert?
Yes.
Roach?
Yes.
Hudson?
Yes.
Rosenberg?
Affirmative.
That'll move forward to next week also.
Thank you. 2.3, please.
2.3 is a resolution authorizing the mayor to execute an agreement with Chris Brothers Asphalt for the 2024 resurfacing program in the amount of $1,238,123.70 based on unit prices submitted. So this is our annual street resurfacing contract. We put that out to bid. Bid openings were last Wednesday. The bid tab is attached. We had 3 prospective bidders, with Chris Brothers being the apparent low bidder. There's also some alternates in there, one for repaving the IT parking lot and another for repairing the concrete section of Illini Drive adjacent to Fulton Junior High. So recommend approval of this, including all of the alternates also.
Thank you. I'm looking for a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion, we have a second. Any conversation? Good.
So I just had a few different comments. So one on, when we're looking at Braeswood, I know we've had discussions there about residents' concerns where the sewer laterals have dipped in the road. So this resurfacing, when they do that, they're going to be putting different aggregate or something to eliminate those, the dips that have been created?
So typically what we do, we'll go in and we'll mill off the 2 inches first, and then we'll take a look at the road and evaluate if any additional patching is needed prior to the final surface. So in some cases, large cracks like you mentioned, it may require removal of a full pavement section and patching it to some degree. Or if we come to another area that's, alligator cracked or has really bad pavement structure underneath where we milled, there's patching assumed in that quantity also to be done prior to the final overlay.
Okay, so.
But not level, I think what you're, not leveling it. If there's a dip in the road, I think what Todd was asking.
I mean, typically those don't drop more than 2 inches. So by the time we mill out that 2 inches of material, it's relatively smooth. But if there isn't, there's leveling binder that goes down and we can smooth it out prior to the final surface going in.
Yeah, they're like little speed bump or dips. So it's for people that like speed dips, they're great. But yeah, it's where the laterals probably came across. Then on another question, when we look at the Illini Drive, I know that's an alternative. So one is just a question if we've thought about it, but if we were doing work along there in widening that sidewalk, since it is the connection up to the bike trail, if there was any thought of that while we were there. And then the second one is just looking at the striping, and maybe this is not the actual striping, but I don't think Fulton lets you turn left into their parking lot, but it's showing the way the turn lane looks. And maybe that's just how it looks.
Yeah, it's just striped as a bidirectional left turn lane, but, you know, yeah, like their northernmost entrance, it is an exit only, so we can look at that. I think what you're seeing right there are the current markings that are out there right now.
Okay,
At
gotcha.
least those arrows down below, but, yeah, we could take a look at that when it comes to striping. And then to answer your question on the trail, or the wider sidewalk, I know that's one alignment we've identified in the bike master plan that we're looking at implementing, and we have a public meeting for that Wednesday, would be considering widening a trail on the side of this road. It's not part of this proposal, though.
Okay. And I just didn't know if there was any, there is no cohesion to it to make it cost effective. That's the only reason I was thinking.
Sure.
If they were already out there. That's all I had. Thanks.
Anybody else on the council, or on the committee? Council? Public? Roll call, please.
Roach.
Yes.
Hudson.
Yes.
Rosenberg.
Affirmative.
Myler.
Yes.
All right, that one will move forward also.
Thank you. 2.4, please.
Okay, 2.4 is a resolution authorizing the mayor to execute an agreement with KRB Excavating, Inc. for the 2024 concrete replacement program in the amount of $474,334.75 based on unit prices submitted. So this really goes along in conjunction with our asphalt overlay program. This is any of the concrete work associated with those areas that need to be done prior to the overlay. So a lot of that entails replacing curbs that are busted up that need to be replaced prior to paving, sidewalk, trippers, redoing all the accessible ramps to bring them up to ADA compliance. So that's everything you see here, and I'd recommend approval of this contract.
Thank you. I'll take a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion, we have a second. Any discussion on the committee? Questions? Council? Good, Jerry? Bless you.
The bids that were solicited were all over the place. And the winning bid was, $300,000 under the next floor. Have we had any experience with these guys?
Yes, KRB's had this contract probably the last 2 or 3 years, I want to say, and they've performed well every time we've had them.
That's immediately.
That one did stand out to us. Adam reached out to the owner just to ask that question, and he said, well, I just took the numbers I did last year and added 10%. So I'm guessing the others maybe weren't as much in need for work this year. I can't speak to how others bid, but.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions from council? Public? Roll call, please.
Hudson.
Yes.
Rosenberg.
Affirmative.
Myler.
Yes.
Roach.
Yes.
That'll move forward till next Monday.
Thank you. 2.5, please.
Okay, last item requiring council action is a resolution authorizing the mayor and city clerk to sign the required IDOT documentation regarding the motor fuel tax fund supplemental for the FY 2025 annual general maintenance program in the amount of $866,937.14. So this is done annually right around this time of year in preparation of rolling into the new budget cycle. It establishes motor fuel tax funds that can be used for general type of street maintenance work, whether that be pipe, salt, rock, asphalt. We pay for street lighting through this fund. And then in addition, there's ways for us to essentially get reimbursed for street sweeping through the general fund through MFT. So all that is categorized within this document, and it requires ultimately city council, the mayor, clerk's approval. So I'd recommend approval of this.
I'll take a motion.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion amongst the committee? Questions, concerns? Council? Public? Roll call, please.
Rosenberg.
Affirmative.
Mylert.
Yes.
Roach.
Yes.
Hudson.
Yes.
Okay, that'll move on to the council meeting.
That is all requiring council action. Jeff, other business is all you.
So other business, first one was just a public informational portion regarding our MS4 program. I figured we've had a lot of stormwater discussion tonight, so it'd be a good one to discuss this. So this is related to the city stormwater system and the permit that we have through the EPA and how it's administered. There is our annual report is attached, so you can go through that to see all the different things that the city's done throughout this past year to be compliant with the permit. One thing that did occur in 2023 was that EPA came on site to perform an inspection. I attached that letter also. It states, the different things that they've observed. The key component that I found at the end that commended my staff for was, it talks about in the summary, the activities that occurred during this period demonstrate that O'Fallon is very proactive in stormwater program, and progress continues to be made. So showing we are following the permit as required by the state, and their inspectors found that to be the case. Also really wanted to inform the council that we're not on this alone doing this program. We are part of a larger committee made up of St. Clair County and 19 other municipalities and units of government within a joint committee. This was a presentation that committee put together that just have some more information. I put that on the board docs if you want to go through it and just get an understanding on how and why that's done. It's really a way for all these communities to kind of cost share on the requirements that are within this, and then kind of put out the same message throughout the whole community as to what we're trying to accomplish as far as stormwater goes. So I'd be happy to answer any questions anyone may have regarding the program or reports.
We'll get to those questions in public comments, unless somebody from the committee has some, or council. It's light reading, I promise. All right.
Okay.
3.2?
So 3.2 is the Public Works FY25 budget. So as I have in past years, put together a budget fact sheet. On this sheet, it really looks at a few things. Let it get pulled up here. It kind of gives you a summary of our expenses and revenues going back to 2022, 2023. Those are actual expenses and revenues, taking a look at what our approved budget was in 2024 to compared to what's proposed in 2025. Numbers jump a lot, right? I mean, you look at it and, you look at, for example, wastewater treatment plant. We're down 66% from last year. Well, it's because the improvements to the treatment plant are ending, so we don't have that expense any longer. The sewer one jumped up a lot. There's been 2 different sewer trunk line replacement projects that have slowed down, and we haven't been able to get out to bid. So what you'll see here is it's not like the entire operational expense are jumping that much. It's all really based off capital improvements we have planned and what's coming and how they line up. The other thing to note on these expenses and revenues is we operate with a balanced budget. To fund a lot of these larger capital projects, we're taking money out of reserves to cover that. So down here, it shows the different dollar amounts taking out of reserves to complete all the proposed projects. 3.3 million in water, 4.1 in sewer, 3.6 in Prop S, and about $500,000 in MFT in total. One thing I'll get to after this slide, the Public Works Department, we currently have 47 full-time employees, 1 part-time and 6 seasonals. I'm proposing to add 2 new full-time street positions into next year's budget, and I have another sheet I'll get to next to kind of give some justification on that. I also like to show just kind of where we stand in relation of the entire general fund. Sandy had these as her presentation. Streets, roughly 13%, facility, 6% of the overall general fund. And then when you look at the city as a whole, and if you take out those transfers Sandy mentioned, Public Works represents about 42% of the total budget compared to the 58% of the remaining. And then the last item on here shows just our managed assets, the miles of streets, the pipe, sewers, water lines, you name it, just to kind of give you an idea of what we're truly maintaining. So then the position request within Streets Department. Okay, so took some time to kind of look at the street department going back 20 years. Back 20 years ago, we were at 20 employees, about 120 miles of streets. That's about 10 miles per employee. You fast forward 20 years later, and we're at 9 employees, almost 180 miles of streets. It's close to 20 miles per employee. So we've almost doubled in that 20-year period. Now, I will say back in '04, when you say there was 12, 3, maybe 4 of those were almost doing exclusively mowing during those years, or those months that mowing was required. We've contracted that out since then, so it's not a straight apples for apples comparison, but it kind of gives you an idea where we've gone at. Even just look at the last 10 years. You go from FY 14 to now, we've went from 16 miles per employee up to 20. And then in turn, I kind of shared what the population increase has been in that same amount of time. And then the final thing I did, I really kind of looked at some of our neighboring communities, got some of their staffing numbers, found that our 19.3 miles per employee was the largest of the, I'll say, larger communities in the Metro East, so Collinsville, Edwardsville, Belleville. I did put in Fairview, just being a neighbor to us here. And based off of that, came up with the proposal to add 2 new employees that would reduce our miles per employee number down to 15.8 miles. Still, above most of our peers, a little below where Belleville is. So if anyone has any questions regarding those 2 positions, I'd be happy to answer them.
I'm not opposed to it, but just curious, so you mentioned that there was some changes based on, outsourcing the work for mowing. Have we outsourced any other work in that time? It seems like somehow we would have had to in order to keep the standard.
Some degrees, and in some, we've actually taken on additional. So the concrete program I just mentioned that we just approved, the KRB, it used to be that when a resident or someone called in with an issue with a concrete sidewalk, a tripper, we'd put it on a list, and we'd tell them, well, when we put out our concrete program for next year, we'll add it to it. So it could be a year from after it's reported that it's getting repaired. We now do all those in-house with our own personnel. We've taken on a lot more of the storm sewer repair jobs where we're going in and replacing existing storm sewer infrastructure. One thing that we could be more proactive is in the storm sewer side of thing is the cleaning up. And when we purchased the new Vector truck for sewer going on almost 2 years ago, we kept the one that we had. And the intent of that is to utilize it to go out to clean catch basins, clean pipes, just to be able to add to the longevity of the life of those materials. So these 2 additional personnel can do that. They can pair up with groups to do additional concrete placement. They can, just today we had Fairwood Hills down to 1 lane doing crack sealing. That's a multi-personnel operation. It almost to the point where we have to shut down everything else we do just to do that, to do it safely. So with these 2 additional personnel will allow us to still do certain tasks like that while performing other ones at the same time.
Okay. And then this goes to my next one. When we talk about like snow plowing, would this add additional, then would these be 2 potentially additional folks that could be out there helping plow?
We could. So, I mean, that's one thing I would want to take a look at probably this summer is, we've talked about internally adding an additional zone. So right now, we stand at, quote me on this, I want to say 7 zones within our snow plowing areas. But as we continue to grow, more and more miles are added to that, and it just takes longer and longer for one person to clear out that zone. So adding an 8th zone, maybe even a 9th, but with that, it's going to have the equipment capability to do that. We do always have at least one spare truck available, but long-term, if we're talking 2 more zones, it would require additional equipment to be purchased to accomplish that.
And like I said, I'm all for it, and I think we have, and particularly when you look at the snow, I would imagine if you did the same comparison to the number of snow plows we have out there to miles, we probably haven't added any snow plows in 15 years either, as we've added miles.
Yeah, I'd have to look through the numbers on that for certain, but yeah, you'd probably get to that point. And again, that's goes back to our policy we have in place on snow removal and how we're able to manage that and keep those costs down.
Sure. But as you add more streets, you're going to end up with more, it happens,
Yep,
right?
correct.
So, okay, thank you.
Any other questions from the committee? Council? Public? Vern?
The other main item, just for the budget.
Hang on.
Oh. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
The only other thing I wanted to really kind of talk about real quick on the budget are the large spend detail. Sandy had it pulled up for the overall city. This is the detail just for Public Works. Rather than going through each one of these, we can kind of highlight some of the construction. The pavement management program one is what we essentially just approved, the asphalt overlay, the concrete replacement. Some other large projects to highlight, the 4th Street rehabilitation. So that's the portion of East 4th Street from Lincoln to Hillgard, and some of the side streets off of that. That'll be reconstructed this year, similar to the Presidential Street projects that have been done over the past 5 years, 6 years now. State Street drainage improvements, North Cherry Street drainage improvements, those are all drainage projects that we've identified in the CIP, hope to get accomplished this next year. Central Park Hartman intersection improvement, that's a large project, $2.5 million. That's adding that additional southbound left turn lane from Hartman onto Central Park. Those are funds $900,000 of that is funded through congestion mitigation federal grant, and the other 1.6 million is coming from DCEO Rebuild Illinois Fund. So none of that will be city funds, which is even better. We have the construction in there for the Public Works Operations Building. At this stage, we've approved the architectural agreement for that, are going through still some programming and costs associated with the budget on that. Before we move forward with the final design, my intent is to come back to committee, show kind of some layouts, some budget numbers, where we're at and why we're going the route we are with it. Water line replacement program, that's one we hope to bid out here in the next couple months. That's a replacement of an area in Fairview Heights off of Union Hill Road in McFessel, similar, close to where we just replaced the Union Hill water line. Other big ones, the Woodstream bypass sewer project, that's the one I referenced earlier on the sewer that has moved in from last fiscal year into this fiscal year. That's a portion of our south sewer trunk line near the Woodstream subdivision. Those are kind of some of the bigger ones. If anyone sees any on there they have specific questions for, I'd be happy to answer them, or you can always send me an email. I could clarify some of them. But majority of them are on the CIP, and I added that CIP number to the far left column of that spreadsheet.
Appreciate it, Jeff. Are there any other questions or concerns from the council or from the committee? Council. All right, we're at public comments portion. Vern, you're up.
Vern Moyer, Ward 3. Just a quick question on the 2 positions that you're going to fill. How are they to be filled?
We'll put out a posting on the city's website. I think we go out through Indeed also, so it'll be a public
Same way we post
opening.
all positions.
Any other position.
Okay, I just wondered how it was being done.
Yeah.
Again, Dave Pfeiffer, the package you put, that presentation wasn't part of this package. Are those slides and going to be available? Are you going to add it to this, or how can I get a hold of those?
I added it today, so it's in there. If you go on the public side of Board Docs now, that presentation's in
It's
there.
part of it, it's attachment to here?
Correct.
Okay, because I pulled this up right before I came here, it wasn't.
You beat him to it.
Yep, it's on there. I was wrapping it up today and wanted to
I did
share
want
it.
to add that I went in and talked to Jeff this week, and when I said there were multiple projects that were going to contribute to alleviating some of the downstream issues, the other one that we had talked about, which we didn't talk about tonight, was the State Street, closer to, my
It's
mind
off
drew
of
a
Carl
blank.
Place.
Yes. Yes, so there's a study that's been conducted that's going to also be a part of the fix downstream. So that was the other one that I had talked to Jeff about. Are there any other public comments? If not, we'll take a motion to adjourn.
Make a motion?
I'll second it. We have a motion, a second. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Thank you, guys and girls.
I've been at this for 30 years, and when I see maps there for the first time, I've been studying stormwater master